Hi there and welcome to this video. A while back I showed you my first camera and it was this this Ryco 35ZF, and I'll put a link above to the video on that. It was my first camera. It was donated to me by one of my grandparents back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and it's still a great camera. I've kept it because whilst it's basic, it's a really great camera to learn on and actually have some fun with. And you know, whilst, as I say, it's basic, you can get some pretty reasonable prints out of it. Because it is, of course, a 35mm camera. So I've set about trying to breathe a new piece of life into this camera, and the first thing was it's got a really rudimentary meter in the viewfinder, and that runs off a little battery in the bottom here. And this is where you realise that over time there is a bit of obsolescence that's come into even the most basic of camera kit. So my first I did some research online and I realised that actually this requires a mercury type battery with 1.3 volts. Now most batteries these days are 1.5 volts. So I thought I would go for and see if I could get the right battery, and I thought I'd ordered the a PX635 battery, which was a mercury free battery. However, what I actually got was a PX625. Now this has a slightly different shape. It's got a top hat shape, which meant it didn't fit with the camera. So that was slightly annoying because it was, I think it was about £8, not a massive amount, but it didn't fit and it was never going to fit. So I did a bit more research, and my second attempt led me to these LR44 batteries, and these are fairly modern batteries. You get them everywhere. These cost me about £1 for a strip of 10, but they are 1.5 volts. Now from research I've done online, I think they should work with the camera, and I managed to fit them in. I thought I might have to use a little bit of tin foil to shimmy them because they are a slightly different size. However, the spring clip in there is still working, and the meter does work, which is great. So that is step one completed. So I now have the camera with its inbuilt meter working again, which is brilliant. The second part of the challenge was to get some 35mm film. This arrived yesterday. I ordered it online, and whilst in the good old days when I was using this camera in anger, there were, you know, the choice of films was massive. These days it's slightly more limited, and I'll get into this eventually. And I've gone for some Kodak Gold. Let's see if we can get that to focus. If I put it in front of there we go. Kodak Gold. Now, in the 90s, this was a real solid performer. It's the kind of film you saw everywhere. You know, when you were at the beach, you saw it in beach shops, you saw it in camera shops. It was the Ford Escort of films. This is a 200 ASA film. When I was shooting, I tended to go for 100 ASA, but you know, this 200 ASA is, you know, it's not too fast, it's not too grainy. It gives balanced, realistic colours. They're a touch warm, so it gives a really nice feel to prints. It has a relatively wide exposure latitude, which is good when I'm not quite sure how well the in-camera meter is going to be working, so I'll give a bit of latitude. Obviously 200 ASA really only useful for reasonably good light situations, but I'm going to be doing some shooting during the day, so it really is the right film for the light, and it's not too expensive. And it's, you know, when you're buying film and you're having to think about what ASA rating film you're going to get, you're fixing the kind of images, you're having to think about what is the nature of the images I'm going to be capturing, what's the lighting, what's the situation, and you're locking into in a greater way that with your choice of film. And it's that brings it home that modern cameras, DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, you have that infinite adaptability with a very high dynamic range, and we perhaps take that for granted these days. So it's been great going back through the process of, you know, getting my 35ZF set up with the battery and with the film. So let's get this loaded into the camera and let's see how it performs. So I'm up here in the Surrey Hills just outside of Guildford today, and the reason I'm here is really to use my Ryco 35ZF. I've loaded it up with film and I thought I'd come out and see what I could capture up here in the beautiful Surrey Hills. As I say, you might just be able to see Guildford Cathedral over my shoulder if I've got the positioning of the camera right. We're not that far out of Guildford, it's only about 2 miles. It's a beautiful piece of woodland that's owned by the local council. So today I'm shooting on my Z7 and I've got the 14-30 lens attached and it's about 20mm. I thought having a wider angle would be quite good to video with my gimbal looking back at me. It gives me a bit more scope for error in the positioning, the crop of the image. And also we're up in some beautiful woodland with some beautiful beech and oak trees. So there might be an opportunity for some nice images with both my Z7 and the Ryco 35ZF. So this might be quite a nice shot to try out the 35ZF. You've got a view here with the trees either side framing the view back down to Shalford Church. So I might just come down a bit, see if I can get the crop right, because obviously it's a fixed focal length lens on my Ryco ZF. I want to look for some foreground interest if I can, if there's any flowers or plants. I'm not sure there is, but let's give it a go here. So I've managed to capture both a portrait version and a landscape version. It'll be interesting to see how they come out. So to get the images or the film processed, I had to take it into the only film processing shop left in my local town. There's obviously not that much demand for it these days. And because of the lockdown, their film processing machine wasn't working. They didn't have the chemicals for it, so I had to wait for them to get the chemicals in. And it's taken a bit longer than I'd anticipated. Now, what I paid for was the film to be processed and then the images to be scanned, or the negatives to be scanned, so the images were on a CD-ROM. I didn't bother getting them printed out. Now what I found when I got the images home is that actually what they've done is scanned them at 800 dpi. Now that's quite a low resolution. It gives images that are 1085 by 709, so what you can see on the screen at the moment is full size. I am going to have to blow them up to probably about twice that size so you can see them on the screen. We're going to have to take that into consideration when we look at the resolution of the images. Now, if you send away films to be processed to a more specialist facility, then what they tend to do is scan in negatives at a minimum of 4000 dpi and will go up from there. So 800 dpi is quite low, and we're going to have to take that into consideration when we're looking at the images. So this is that first image blown up to twice size. Now when I got the images back and looked at them on my computer, what I've realised is the first few images have got this black line down the centre of them. Now I've looked back at the negatives and it's not on the negatives, so it was an error in the scanning. You can see there's a green line to the left of the black line as well, so we're going to live with that because they're not the greatest of images, so I'm not going to waste my time going back and getting them rescanned. But what you can see here is this is quite a high contrast image. You've got the deep shadows in the trees and the very white clouds in the sky, and actually the colours are slightly muted, slightly subdued, but that's what we will remember from film like the Kodak 200 back in the day, and it's not a bad image. So let's have a look at what we can do in Adobe Lightroom to see whether we can pull some of that back, and let's compare the Adobe Lightroom edited image with the one that's on screen now. So I didn't spend long in Lightroom, I just did a few quick auto edits and played around with the sky a little bit. See, what you can see is there was quite a bit more resolution in the sky. You can see more definition in the clouds. We brought out some of the shadows in the trees there and added a bit more texture into the grass. And actually, when you remember this is up at twice the size of the original file, it's not a bad image from a film quality perspective. And then this is the landscape version of the image that I took. And again, you can see with a little bit of playing around in Lightroom, we can really improve the image quite a lot. So this could be my next shot, the beautiful green, verdant green colour against the blue sky and the white clouds. Let's give it a try and see how the contrast comes out and the lighting with the ZF.
So this image was really testing the film and the camera because it was increasingly high contrast between the clouds and the shadows in the tree. We also have the blue sky peeping through. You can see that the original scanned image is slightly more washed out, but with a little bit of tweaking in Lightroom we can bring that back. I also had to do a little bit of tweaking with the white balance just to get the greens a little more verdant like it was when I was there. But again, you know, the ability of this film to bring out the high contrast and cope with the high contrast settings that we're throwing at it is pretty good.
So for that last shot, the meter on the Ricoh's 35ZF was telling me that I needed 1/500th of a second at f16. So that's what I dialed in. I also had to remember that the focus is not autofocus and you have to set the settings on the ring. But what it does bring home is how used to the fact how versatile modern mirrorless cameras are, and how we've become used to the fact that you can switch between any ISO from sort of ISO 60 on the Z7 up to ISO 51,000, 108,000. It brings back, because you know, once you load the film into a 35mm camera, you're fixed to the ISO rating or the ASA rating of the film you've put in there. I've got an ASA 200 film, and at home indoors it struggled because it was too dark for it, and out here it's struggling because it's getting to be a little bit bright with the limitation of 1/500th of a second in the Ricoh as a shutter speed. So we're getting a bit too used to perhaps our versatility of our mirrorless cameras, and using a 35mm camera is a great leveler again to get you to think and prepare for what you're going to shoot. My 2-minute tips videos for the Z series have really come in, because what I wanted to do was to, whilst I've got the versatility of these Z series cameras, I wanted to get back into really thinking in advance of what kind of shoot am I going on, what am I going to likely to be shooting, and therefore what settings should I be dialing into the camera, preparing for what I'm going to shoot, which is a great discipline to get back into. So this gnarly old sort of dead oak tree, or partially dead oak tree in the middle of the woods was my next subject. I saw in this image a bit of a square crop. However, again, you know, whilst we're used to being able to very quickly switch to a square crop in our modern cameras, with the 35ZF I had the option of landscape or portrait, so I'll probably have to do some scanning and cropping if I want to turn it into that square image that I saw back in post-production. And again, it was at 1/500th of a second, and f5.6 for this one, the meter was telling me. So it'll be interesting to see how accurate the metering is on a camera of vintage sort of 40 years.
So I was quite pleased with how this image came out. You've got a little bit of a challenge with the light coming down from above, but if you look at it you can see there's quite a lot of definition in the bark of the tree, and if we had these negatives scanned in at a much better resolution we'd probably have quite a good image here that we could actually work from. So again, the film is keeping up with the situation. The camera settings seem to be quite accurate with that meter. Remember, I'm just using the meter in the camera to give me an indication of what settings I need. Again, with a little bit of adjustment in Lightroom we can get some quite good images. This has got the 1:1 crop I was looking for. One thing it is showing me is there is a slight parallax error in the rangefinder viewfinder. I'm going to have to work on that because it's not like a through the lens camera. What you see is not necessarily what you get, and I've chopped the top off the tree a little bit here, so I'm going to have to work on that. But again, not too bad an image.
Also have to remember, and we get so used to this, having metadata baked into our images with digital cameras. With the ZF you obviously get no metadata, and therefore having your shot book with you, which I forgot today, is really useful if you want to learn how your camera works and how the settings work and how accurate the meter is. So we're now climbing up, further up the hill towards a place called St Martha's Church, and I can assure you it's whilst it's not a massively long or steep climb, it's on sand, which makes it quite energy sapping. But it is worth it when you get there, the views you get out across the Surrey Hills.
So I've just taken a couple of shots of the vista up here and the church with the Ricoh ZF. Again, they were both at 1/500th of a second and f/16. Be interesting to see how they deal with the sort of very high contrast white clouds and then some of the shadows in the valley below. So as with the previous images, I've tweaked it a little bit in Lightroom, and it's brought out the definition in the sky, and I think the colours in this show that even a 40-year-old camera with some reasonable film in it can come up with some great results. You know, it's captured the yellowy orange of the field with the green of the foliage and the blue of the sky whilst keeping the definition in the clouds. And admittedly, these are scanned images at 800 dpi, so again, if we scanned them properly at a higher resolution, we'd get much better images to work from. And this is where actually, if you shoot in film, bringing it together with some of the modern technology in Lightroom and Photoshop, actually you can get some really great images even from an older camera. To me, this image lends itself to a 16:9 crop. So this is a 16:9 crop. I've expanded it up to fill the whole of the screen for you. And as you can see, it's not bad quality considering that 800 dpi resolution of the scanning. So I think I'm just going to stop for a second, take in the view, make myself a cup of coffee and have a think about things. So I've paused up here at St Martha's Church just to take in the view. Got my MSR wind burner, which is brilliant in this wind. It boils up a cup of water for a cup of coffee in probably about a minute. It's almost impervious to the wind. And I've got my Atlas Athlete backpack with me. And so I'm testing a mixture of different things today in this walk up to St Martha's Church. My Atlas Athlete backpack is working really well. I've got the thicker belt on today. I weighed it before I came out, and I had my gimbal, my Z7, my 14-30 in there, my Ricoh ZF, my wind burner, and a waterproof and water and various things. It came to about 7 kilos. So that's 5 kilos of load and about 2 kilos for the bag. So it was really to test out a slightly heavier kit in there, and it's been perfectly good climbing up the hill here. Not too warm on my back, not too heavy, or I've managed to get the settings right because there's loads of different settings on here. I've got the, you can see the net on the front now, which is great for carrying the gimbal underneath if I want, or my waterproof. So that's working out really well, and the ability to have this hybrid nature of the top for your waterproof or perhaps gimbal if you don't want to disassemble it is really useful. So it's a pretty versatile backpack and is working really well for me. So I've got my coffee, I've got my view. What more could you ask for? I'm just going to be looking for some more potential Ricoh 35 ZF shots on the way back down. Whether I'll get through my whole 36 exposure film today, I don't know. I also want to do a comparison in the future. Got this sneaky idea of doing, getting perhaps an ISO 200 or an ISO 100 film when I'm in town today, and doing a bit of a shoot off between the Z7 and the Ricoh. Slightly unfair, but I think the Ricoh might show the Z7 a bit of a run for its money in certain circumstances, considering it's 40 years older. So that might be a video to come. Might take me a little while to get that one sorted, but until then, I'm going to enjoy my coffee. Time to wend my way back down the hill towards Guildford. It'll take me about an hour to walk back there, so beautiful view from St Martha's Day. Nice to get a bit of sunshine while we're up here. Let's see about the walk. So I hope you enjoyed this walk up to St Martha's Church this morning. Let me know what you think about the shots I got with my Ricoh. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe, does help the channel. Hit the notification bell and you'll be notified of future videos. And I look forward to seeing you on a future video.